Couldn't help myself. Hello, I'm GC Mackay, and today we're going to be talking about Patrick Süskind's Perfume. It was first published in 1985 and translated into English, I think, the following year. And it has since then become, well, huge, really. It's still read to this day, as far as I'm aware, and spoken about and talked about, and I believe still in print by the amount of different editions that I've come across during my time. The one I have is by Penguin. I quite like the cover, though I think it could be better, personally. But anyway, it's Kurt Cobain's, I think, favourite book. I'm going to cover that now before someone feels the need to mention it in the comments. The song Scentless Apprentice was obviously written in dedication to the book. And really, I'm not surprised that Kurt Cobain loved it so much, especially looking at his own artistic efforts, and especially the lyrics he often would use and speak about within them. Usually things about returning to the womb, about, well, wanting to die, things like that. And that actually fits in pretty nicely with Perfume and what it wants to talk about, especially in the sense of the macabre and of the pretty putrid elements of humanity in general, I would venture to say. But yeah, I mean, it tells the story of Jean-Baptiste. That is probably the best you're going to get in terms of me saying it properly. I don't really know whether that's correct. I think it's about right, but yeah, it's one of those French names that's really fucking hard to pronounce, especially if you're a, Anglo-Saxon arsehole like myself. But yeah, it's actually, that's probably my only little kind of bone to pick with the piece. It's like sometimes you come across a novel and you read the name of the dude or dudess, and you're just like, how the fuck do you say that name? I mean, it happens a lot with Russian novels, which is more to be expected. But occasionally there'll be a French one or a German one or whatever one, and you're just like, man, like every time I read that name, I'm just going to kind of brush over it because I don't really know how to say it or even think of it in my head. So it's like, yeah. But that's just a little kind of pet peeve, and it's totally fine. It's just, reflective of my ignorance, I suppose, which is probably why it bothers me. But yeah, Jean-Baptiste Grenouille. And it's the story of him basically from birth till death. I should mention there might be a few spoilers in this, but I won't mention any specific incidents, or if I do, I'll try to be more preemptive about them when I do, as this review goes on. But yeah, from the moment we begin this novel, the sense of the olfactory is just there. Like, it's present as you probably expect it to be. But what I was surprised and delighted by was how repulsive everything was. It was just, we're in the middle of 18th century France, in Paris specifically, and there is a reason for that as well, especially with perfumery and things like that. But what I really liked was Süskind's use of the repugnant rather than anything that might be pleasing to the sense of the nose, or aromatic, let's say. It's much more about how everything's kind of grimy, disgusting, fish-like specifically, but also just like, you really get the sense of the time and place by using the sense of smell as well. Like, I really felt like I was traveling back to this time, and yeah, and it's something that you don't even really imagine that much when you think back to these times. Yeah, the sense of smell must have been fucking disgusting, basically. It must have been awful to have a sense of smell in a lot of regards, mainly because sanitization was obviously not as prevalent as it is today. But in general, things were just left to be. And when we do that, things rot. So, yeah, this whole notion of filth and repugnancy again, and just like the putrid and pungent and blah, like, but it's highly engaging, and you're just like, wow, you're just really in it straight away. And Jean-Baptiste is born, presumed to be dead, like like many of the stillborns that his mother supposedly had. He just kind of plops out into a bucket of fish heads, pretty much, and she's just like, well, oh, it's another one, is it? Oh, fuck it. And she just leaves it, like, presuming it's dead, but also for dead at the same time. This gets found out once the baby is revealed to be alive, and then she is quickly sent to the guillotine for multiple cases of infanticide, and that's the end of her. Like, that's bang. Like, that's how this novel begins, and it is also indicative of how it will be paced throughout, which I really loved. So, like, I thought, oh, most writers would really want to delve into, you know, the boring shit like their personal history, why she felt it was fine to just abandon the baby and blah, blah, blah. But no, none of that. Süskind is like very on it, like he's very controlled with his pen. You can trust what he's doing. And he's just like, no, this is just how it begins. And then very quickly we're into his like early infancy, let's say. But just before that, he is looked after by a nanny, and he's got a ravenous appetite. He basically sucks her tit off and to the bone, pretty much. But she's not really that bothered about this. She visits the local priest, I think it is, or some kind of pastor or whatever, and she just wants to get rid of the kid, like this baby. She doesn't know really, like she doesn't want to tell him why, but she's just like, you know, it's fine. He's got an insatiable appetite. I'm not bothered about any of that, really, even though it's exhausting me, not just in the flesh, literally, but also physically. It's just that he has no sense of smell himself. Like, there's no scent emanating from this baby. And she's just like, this is of the devil, pretty much. Like, that's what she eventually confesses. She doesn't think in a way that he's human, which again is going to play out throughout the novel really well. And I thought what Süskind did at the beginning was really play with the ambiguity of meaning behind everything, and that plays out as the novel progresses wonderfully. Like, I thought masterfully. Like, it was just like, oh, this is the mark of true. I don't like using the word Jesus so much, but when somebody does have that confidence of what their story is, there is just a comfort that comes with it. And regardless of how, you know, repugnant some of the descriptions may or may not be, it just puts you at ease in the sense that you know what kind of story you're getting into. But saying that, it has such a unique quality because it doesn't focus on every sense, as you probably would presume from the title of the novel, but be that as it may, most writers, or we're told as authors, that, you know, if you're struggling in certain scenes, think about what the characters are going through, but mainly think about their senses. So, you know, their sight, how they feel, you know, all of them, basically. But this one just hones in on the olfactory. And that's unique within itself. I don't think I'd ever read a novel where it's done that. And it made for a really interesting dynamic going on, because it makes you think about your sense of smell more than I would say any other novel has done. I've actually got a close friend who has a first edition of this book. And after reading it myself, I kind of realized that I think why he is quite sensitive to smell, or at least seems to be, is probably to do with this novel, because in between periods where, you know, I wasn't reading it, I was really starting to notice smells a lot more. It's almost like it gets under your skin and therefore releases through your own sense of inhalation, in a sense. But it's just like, wow, it gets into you really quickly, and it makes you notice things. It gives an effervescence to life, essentially, which is what I loved about it overall. Like, it really kind of brought a vivacity to everything around you in a way. Like, you're just a bit more sensitive to everything, and you're just like, wow, this book is like, it lives in you as much as, you know, within your imagination, kind of thing. So Jean-Baptiste Grandry, as I did kind of briefly mention, he emanates no smell himself, and this later on causes a lot of problems with his identity, essentially. But as he grows up, he's an orphan, obviously, but also, like, because of the time, he's quickly thrown into work. Like, you know, from the age of like 5 or 6, maybe 7, he's a tanner, and he's just doing all the grimmest fucking jobs imaginable. But he's dealing with everything that's very putrid by nature. But it doesn't bother him. Like, smells don't have any, like, displeasure to him per se. Like, he knows when they're not pleasant, but it's not like it really affects him mentally or in any sense. It's just like he just recognizes smell, and that's pretty much it. I mean, there are some studies that show that our hunter-gatherer ancestors did also use their sense of smell a lot more than we do. I think it's reported that, or believed, that they could sense whether something was poisonous, let's say a mushroom or certain fungi or whatever, but they could tell mainly from what scent it emanated. Whereas, you know, nowadays we're just like, oh, that's a cigarette, or oh, fishy, or, you know, or that's like pollution or whatever. We don't really have that capability anymore to really differentiate between very subtle and difficult to perceive sense. So obviously, with the title of it being Perfume, you've already got a clue of where it's headed. There's only one career that this guy can ever hope to have, and it befittingly, it is with, of course, with his supernatural ability to smell things that are miles away. You know, I mean, he can detect it coming around the corner a lot of the time, and eventually the scent that he strives for the most is one that he hasn't ever smelt before. As he, you know, rises up and he starts working for a perfumer, obviously with his skill, he doesn't need to use any of the utensils or measuring devices whatsoever. And this also pays heed to a very, I thought, dynamic scene between him and his sorcerer's apprentice, because he is the sorcerer's apprentice, sorry. And I'll get a bit more into that a little later on, but yeah, you know what's going to happen. Like, he doesn't need anything. He can just mix and play, and he can come up, and he eventually emulates a certain perfume that is causing the perfumer himself a lot of problems because it's running him out of business, basically. And obviously, Grandry does this bang. Like, it takes him a matter of minutes, and he doesn't use any of the utensils, or, you know, or none of that. He doesn't need it. He can detect things in the dark, essentially. So in some ways his sense of smell is like echolocation, I thought, at times, because it's like he just knows his way around just by sniffing the air, which is obviously slightly different to echolocation, but I'd imagine it's kind of similar in its how it feels, maybe. But after he successfully does this, it's in and around this time that he gets a whiff of what turns out to be a virgin, and what he doesn't realize is a virgin at the beginning. That's the thing. And it always seems to be red-headed young maidens who are particularly beautiful themselves as well. But it's not their beauty that entices him whatsoever. Like, he catches a tiny whiff of this scent and then hunts her down, literally. And then when he does come face to face with her, he's so enraptured by this unutterable kind of scent that she's giving off that he doesn't even know how to fathom it, really. And that eventually leads him to strangling her to death. Like, pretty much like bang as well. Like, there's a lot of moments within this piece where Süskind will lead you up to an event and you're kind of anticipating how descriptive it may or may not be, or how enriched it will be with the language and the playing with prose and all of. No, bang, dead. Like, there's a lot of times where it's just like, whoa, like that suddenly, like, people are just dying, and then it's next, like, move on to the next, and that brings me to the similarities I found it had with the Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, who I have reviewed before in the past. But not only is it based in France, not only do we have a sorcerer's apprentice plot point, which is the beginning of the Count of Monte Cristo, but it's also the language that's used, and I thought that was highly impressive, actually, considering it was written in 1985. To have it reference Alexandre Dumas so well, and that might be a credit to the translation, I'm not sure, but in terms of the actual plot as well, it's insanely similar. Like, I thought Edmond Dantes' character was quite reflective of Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, but with one distinct difference being obviously his sense of smell, but also the fact that Grenouille is a psychopath, really. Or I actually think he's not really human overall. Like, though he has the appearance of one, he himself doesn't feel like he's human. He hates humanity. His misanthropy was delightful to me, obviously, but also, like, I think a lot of that came out from his outsider status and his, being so distinctly different yet so similar at the same time. So, and also the fact that he has, the most powerful canine-like sense of smell, but doesn't have any smell himself, gives this kind of contradictory, paradoxical nature to his being as it is. But then it's also that other people don't really react to him as a human being. He can easily go by unnoticed a lot of the time. And eventually this leads him to abandoning everything. Like, he goes, fuck humanity. I've had enough of them. They're disgusting. They stink anyway. Like, I don't want anything to do with them. And that's when he takes the kind of Nietzschean, thus spoke Zarathustra, but which is also reflective of the messiahs of history, especially throughout religious texts. Jesus, Muhammad, the Buddha, all of them at some points renounced everything and just went to the mountains or the woods, and they just live in caves. I don't think it's by any accident that Grenouille does the same thing. For 7 years, he lives basically like a savage. He has no, discerning taste whatsoever. Like, if there's a bug on the ground, that's food to him. He'll eat things raw. Like, he turns omnivorous, essentially. But he just lives inside a cave, and I would say that those are probably the best years of his life. He lives his best life, to use a modern phrase, in this manner. And I don't know. I don't actually necessarily disagree with it. Like, it would make sense because he is supernatural, really. Like, to look at him as a human being, I think you can't help doing yourself as being a human being, but really he is of a messiah-like personification of a person, if that makes sense. Like, his skill is of the supernatural, like, it's unknown to us, so that gives him an inhumane element that he can't really get away from, and that does lead to his misanthropy, I would say, overall. Like, his disgust at humanity is the fact that he only really looks like one of them. He doesn't ever come to be seen as one. And I think that issue with his identity separates him like cruelly, so that he goes off and lives in a cave 7 fucking years, eating bugs and doing whatever and not washing and all of that kind of stuff. But eventually that doesn't quite work out for him, because he kind of plans on doing that for the rest of his life. Like he doesn't really want to leave. But through a certain series of events, he finds that he has to. And without skipping too much onto that, that leads on to quite a comical part where he's kind of reborn in a way, like to at least appear like a human being. But then that eventually leads into a certain city, Gliss, I think it might be pronounced, but don't quote me on that one. And that's where he learns, or at least he hones his skills to perfection. And of course, when he's there, the scent of a virgin isn't far behind. And yeah, it turns into a bit of a bloodbath. But I didn't think Süskind really delved too much into the concept of murder throughout it. It's kind of par for the course in Glonry's existence. Like if he wants something, and he knows how to get it, he'll just do it. Like there's no conscience like that comes into it at all. Like it, and I thought Süskind dealt with that pretty well overall, because if he did try to, give each individual plan its own kind of motivation and how he felt and all of this kind of stuff, it just wouldn't have worked. Like, he didn't need that. It was more like he had a goal, he knew how to obtain that goal, and so he set out and did it. And before long, yeah, I mean, he's basically like a serial killer overall. And yeah, they're all the same types of girls, pretty much. There was a lot of redheads around in this place, but yeah, sometimes they didn't even need to be redheads. I can't remember if he actually realised that they were virginal, but yeah, perhaps it was more to do with their innocence, their purity, but within that time frame of them going into womanhood. So he's capturing that moment essentially, which would probably lead him to getting, I don't know, cancelled nowadays, or the book being cancelled, just because of that, like, insinuation, let's say. But I suppose that leads me onto the ending. So if you want to stop viewing now, I would, because I'm going to talk about it a bit and then close this review. But I thought the ending was fucking brilliant, actually. It's taken me a little while to digest it, to hone it in, mainly because it's not sudden or anything like that. You sense something coming, but you don't really. I didn't predict it overall, and in some ways it was so good that I felt like I should have predicted it. Like it was like, that makes sense. It all kind of rounds about, but it's like a fable. Like this whole story is like a psychological thriller mixed with a fable, mixed with a fairy tale, mixed with a kind of perspective that you're familiar with, yet you haven't been encountered by before. Like it's got so many different elements. Even Gothic literature kind of plays its part, especially in the olfactory descriptions and things like that. Like it really uses that kind of classical literature style mixed with a modern pace overall, and that's what was so exciting reading it. Like you can't, even during the bits where he takes his 7-year hiatus in a cave, you're kind of really intrigued by how he's living and what type of human being this is, or even if it is a human being at all, kind of thing. But yeah, it eventually leads him, because at some point he starts to make perfumes to give him the impression of being a human being, and he does this so well that he can create one that will provoke people into sympathizing with him. So old ladies will just try and give him money because they assume that he's a kind of beggar person, like a child as well. So their nurturing element comes out and they just want to take care of him, really. But this is all because of his scent. He hasn't got his own scent. He never has that. So he never really has an identity, but he does know how to create the impression of one. And there's others where he uses it where he can just blend in with the crowd, be accepted, seem like a jovial, great human being. And of course, after he's caught for being a murderer, he has already come up with his perfect scent, which is basically the scent of a virgin. But he gives him a purity and a kind of an impression that people just can't refute. So he's being led to the guillotine. He comes out on a cart, led by a horse. And it's just like everyone there is in such awe of who comes out. And they just can't believe that he would commit murder or even be capable of committing murder. So he gets this Messiah reception. And then everyone starts fucking. Like literally everyone. Like the descriptors in it were even pretty grim. Like, there's paedophilic things going on, incestual, like old and young and fucking decrepit and posh, every kind of mix. Like it is an orgy within an orgy within an orgy. And Guangli is just standing there going, at first he thinks he's going to enjoy the whole spectacle and feel like the god he always believed he kind of was. But when he sees how mindless and disgusting really human beings are, even the process of sex and like the orgasm that would bring about the virginal blah blah blah, it's a massive disappointment to him. And he's just like, now what, kind of thing. And he's actually heartbroken by it because he thought it would give him what he's been longing for so long, which is an identity. Like he thought it would somehow bring that about. But when he actually sees what he can provoke so easily, he kind of I suppose he feels like a fraud overall. Like he feels like a charlatan because he knows it's all to do with the scent. It's nothing to do with him. And he knows that once that wore off, he would be massacred within seconds, kind of thing. Like there's no truth to it, which I suppose is kind of what he's on the hunt for the whole time as well. Like he's trying to find a meaning behind everything, and he presumes himself to be that meaning. And when, no matter what he does, he can't quite reach that goal, it breaks him, I think, overall. And then he returns to where he came from. And he's not, but he adorns the same perfume, I believe. But he goes into the derelict area in which he was born, where all the, outcasts, criminals, retrobates, degenerates, where all they conglomerate. And then he's eaten alive, essentially. And it's just like perfect ending. Like it was majestically put together, I thought, because it really captures everything in it. You've got the religious connotations, you've got the Messiah complex and history within it, and also the ambiguity of everything, like how one thing can seem so black and white, but then when you flip it on its head, it seems more like white and black, and then of course everything becomes grey. And I just thought that actually captured what it means to be a human being. And it's just like, I mean, I've often wanted to try and write a fable, but I read that and I was just like, the ending's just so fucking good, like perfection, I would say, because of its imperfection, and the fact that Granry, for the first time, feels what love is by being eaten alive. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to say, actually, I think it's genius overall. Like, yeah, I was in awe, actually, overall. And that's kind of what the novel provokes. I don't think I'll smell things the same ever again because of this book. That's how fucking good I think it is. So, yeah, full marks from me on that front. I love the writing. I love a fable overall. I've reviewed a few on here overall, but this one kind of took it to a different level because it wasn't in a novella format. It's a novel, a proper novel, and I felt it really dealt with the subject matter so well and had such a unique quality to it as well. Like, fuck knows how he came up with the idea, but it must have been something to do with his fascination with this sense of smell, obviously. But the way it's penetrated and released and, basically put onto the page, yeah, it's the stuff of really great novels, and I thoroughly recommend it if I haven't already ruined it. There are moments of humour within it, but also there is a distance. I mean, because it's told in third person as well, I felt like you felt like you were having that overview of everything, so it wasn't too penetrative within your own mind. It wasn't like you were giving it your viewpoint. There was a good distance, so you were just viewing it as a kind of linear, structured narration about Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, who you never really relate to because he isn't really like a human being until perhaps until his death, really, which again is probably demonstrative of what it's like to be human, because a lot of the time we are martyred through death, whereas within our lifetimes we can be hated and be of ill repute and all of that kind of thing. There was one other thing I was just going to mention, which I found kind of comical in it, because you eventually start to expect it, but whenever Grenouille moves on to the next phase of his life, the whoever's been involved with him during however small a period it was, their demise comes very quickly after he's gone. So there is also a sense of wherever he is, destruction will follow quite shortly behind, especially as he takes the journey to the next place. Like wherever he leaves, death isn't far behind. And because you get used to that, you kind of think, you start rubbing your hands together going, oh, I wonder how this fucker's going to die now, kind of thing. Which I thought was a kind of comical subplot in a way, because it was like you were expecting it. You knew it was going to happen, but you were kind of licking your lips over how it was going to happen. So yeah, that's it. That's my review of Perfume by Patrick Süskind. Hope you've enjoyed it. And yeah, let me know your thoughts on it if you've read it yourselves. If you know of any other fables that might be comparable to it, I'd love to hear them. There's a few myself that I think encapsulate the human condition, which would be The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, which is no surprise. But also The Tartar Steppe by Dino Buzzati. I think that one is a marvel to behold. And there are others that obviously I'm not remembering right this instant, but they're quite hard to come across overall. And what I thought this novel did so well was just mixing everything together. It's like a perfume concoction within itself in some ways, using different genres and different time periods and different styles and pacing and all of that kind of stuff. And that's what just makes it such a marvel to behold overall. But yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for watching this. Hope you've enjoyed it. And see you soon. Bye.